So the legislative framework for the CCUS was established in 2009 with the publication of the EU CCS directive. So as there was an increased interest in the deployment of such technologies, supplementary legislations and policies and strategies have been published ever since. The Paris Agreement, the European Climate Law, the EU 2040 climate target were actually the opportunities that boosted the interest in the CCS deployment technologies. So there are some legislations and some policies that they are directly linked with the CCUS, and they are displayed in this table. So first of all, the EU CCS directive, as we said, was the first regulatory framework which was dedicated to the CCS geological storage. In 2024, we had two important developments. We had the publication of the EU Industrial Carbon Management Strategy and the Net Zero Industry Act regulation. The first one aims to develop carbon dioxide capture, use, transport and storage technologies, as well as the regulatory and investment framework to support them. And the Net Zero Industry Act regulation sets a clear target of minimum 50 million tons per year of carbon dioxide storage capacity by 2030. Then additionally to that, we have the London Protocol, which is international treaty for waste disposal in the marine environment. And in 2009, they have proposed an amendment to enable the transboundary carbon dioxide transport and storage. The amendment has not yet entered into force since only 11 out of the 54 contracting parties have actually agreed to that. So there are some additional legislations and strategies that they are affecting the CCUS technologies. First of all, we have the Trans-European Networks for Energy Regulation, which has been revised in 2022 in order to encompass energy infrastructure priority corridors and areas. Then we have the Refuel EU Aviation Regulation, which supports the uptake of renewable fuels of non-biological origin in the aviation sector. We have the Fuel EU Maritime Regulation, which does the same for the maritime sector. Then, of course, we have the EU Certification Scheme for Carbon Removals, which promotes innovative carbon removal technologies and establishes certification rules for binding carbon in long-lasting products and materials. Then the EU Monitoring and Reporting Regulation, which sets monitoring and reporting requirements for the carbon dioxide capture, transport and geological storage, which is very important for the effective implementation of the EU ETS. And last, we have the revised EU CCS directive guidance documents, which are necessary to enhance the comprehension of the EU CCS directive requirements to interested parties. So actually there is all of these legislations, they have created in principle a rich regulatory and legislative environment for the deployment of CCUS technologies, but in practice, we expect that additional legislations and strategies will have to be applied both on a national and an EU level. So for every new technology, there has to be some substantial financial support in order to make the projects economically viable. So it's necessary that government funding support mechanisms are actually established in order to overcome the barriers and mitigate investment risks. There are different ways to do that. So you can do that by capital grants, tax credits and incentives, tariff subsidies, carbon contracts for difference, which is a case very much used in different countries around the world, support agreements such as loan supports or government entity equity investments, and of course, carbon pricing and emissions trading schemes. Especially for the EU ETS, it is expected that by July 2026, the Commission shall report on how the negative emissions resulting from the carbon capture and storage will be actually implemented in the EU ETS system. So as the market evolves and it develops, it is expected that funding from the government will actually phase out, and we're expecting, actually it's necessary to use market-led revenue streams. So there are different ways to approach that. One possibility would be the development of low carbon products, market for low carbon products. Then a possibility is to use voluntary carbon markets, and of course, tradable CCS or carbon storage certificates. For all these years, we had innovation funding support schemes, such as EU funds, like Horizon Europe, the Innovation Fund, and Connecting Europe Facility funding, which have been supporting research up until full-scale applications for the CCUS deployment. And then, of course, we also had the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which gave the possibility for funding CCS projects if those were encompassed in a country's recovery and resilience plan from COVID-19. So there are some other barriers that CCS projects are facing. The complexity and the lead times of the CCUS projects, they depend on the capture technology which is being used, the transfer infrastructure which is being developed, the availability, of course, of storage sites, permitting procedures, open legal and regulatory issues, the securing of financing, cross-border deviations for technical specifications, and of course, social acceptance. The deployment of CCUS projects can be facilitated by the modularization of technologies, the establishment of one-stop shop for permits, and the establishment of clear timelines, concrete legal and regulatory frameworks spanning across the value chain, the assessment of resources also across the value chain, the development of common specifications for technologies, infrastructure, and projects, and then, of course, bilateral agreements between countries, which will be supplementary to the EU legislation. So let's have a look on the EU market forecast for the power generation. This is a very interesting graph because we can retrieve data and make some useful conclusions. It's actually clear that by 2050, the electricity demand will increase significantly. After 2040, it is expected that coal will be practically eliminated from the energy mix. There will be still a notable natural gas demand for power generation until 2050. The power generation from renewable energy sources will boost by 2050, so it has to be ensured that there is network stability. The use of natural gas-fired power plants and electricity storage can and will assist in the network stability and the security of supply. And to us, at least at ELPEDISON, it's clear that apart from hard-to-abate industries, CCS should be deployed in natural gas power plants, as they will continue to generate a considerable amount, a considerable share of the total electricity demand. So let's move on by having a more thorough look in 4 specific countries, which are either leading countries in the CCUS deployment, or they're considering to do applications in the power sector. So starting with the UK, UK is no longer an EU country, but they have a very clear strategy on how to achieve the net zero scenario by CCUS deployment. And they focus on the development of a competitive CCUS market. The UK is a party to the London Protocol, and they have already accepted the 2009 amendment. They have a UK emission trading system, and they have recently closed a public consultation for the integration of greenhouse gas removals into the ETS. It's really interesting to point out that they are moving along with the development of CCUS clusters. The most renowned ones is the East Coast cluster and the HyNet cluster. Both of them, they comprise of projects of carbon capture in industry, carbon capture in gas-fired power plants, and the production of low-carbon hydrogen. For us, it's really interesting to have a look in the net zero tailside power, which is expected to be the world's biggest investment in carbon capture in the natural gas power plant. In the UK, they are using CCFDs, carbon contracts for difference, especially for the applications in natural gas-fired facilities. They have established the dispatchable power agreement, which is a type of contract for difference. So this comprises of two payments. The first part is the availability payment, which pays for the availability of dispatchable generation capacity, which is of course low carbon and weather independent. And the second payment is a variable payment that pays for the additional cost of electricity generation compared to the unabated CCGT reference plant. Moving on to the United States of America, with the Biden presidency, it has been clear that they are shifting towards the creation of a legislative framework for the climate mitigation. In 2021, they have signed the US Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is a law which gives substantial financial support to infrastructure investments. CCUS is also included. Section 45Q of the US tax code involves tax credits for projects and investments. It's interesting to point out that there has been a partial shift of the policy deployment from the federal to the states level. And of course, in 2024, there has been a release of a joint policy statement and principles for the responsible participation in voluntary carbon markets. Regarding the projects, they have been facilitating projects in diverse industrial sectors. They were the first ones to apply CCS facilities in coal-fired power plants. The most renowned project is the Petra Nova in Texas and the Project Tundra in North Dakota. Their initial interest in the capture, the carbon utilization was for enhanced oil recovery, but we're currently seeing that they are shifting away from that and they are focusing on other utilization pathways. So at the moment, they have 10 CCS ongoing projects in natural gas-fired power plants. And apart from tax credits, they are also using low-cost government loans and direct grants. In Canada, there's a similar situation. They are also focusing on creative legislative framework for the climate mitigation. They are also using tax credits for the investments, and they are actually prioritizing the financing for different, let's say, applications. And they have additionally been using carbon pricing for industrial emitters. They have also had applications in the coal-fired power plants, initially focusing on EOR applications, but currently they have shifted away from that, and specifically EOR is not considered eligible anymore for the utilization of the carbon dioxide. They have been having a notable research and development efforts between the public and the private sector. And there is one big project where we are focusing on because we find it very interesting, is the Glacier gas plant, where carbon capture will be applied on one gas-fired power generation turbine and 9 gas-fired engines. So carbon contracts for difference have also been used by the Canada Growth Fund, and at the moment they have 4 CCS ongoing projects in natural gas-fired power plants. For us, Germany is a really interesting country because they are, of course, part of the EU. They are a party to the London Protocol, but they have not yet accepted the 2009 amendment. Currently, they are applying projects that focus on industrial applications, mostly in the cement and lime sectors. And they have been also using carbon contracts for different schemes to support financially the investments. What they have done is that they have actually prioritized the CCUS applications based on a scoring model. The A score, which is the highest, is the, let's say, the highest that they are prioritizing to give money to the cement, lime, and thermal waste treatment. The D score, which is the lowest, is the aluminium natural gas-fired power plants and combined heat and power plants. So at the moment for Germany, CCS deployment in power plants is legally possible, but it's not yet subsidized. But what is interesting to point out is that in 2024, they have released their Power Plant Safety Act, which is an act that aims to lower redispatch costs and ensure grid stability. It focuses on the development of a sufficient number of new gas-fired power plants in order to ensure the security supply when the renewable energy sources are limited in the energy mix. So they actually plan for 5 gigawatts of gas-fired plants, 7 gigawatts of new and modernized gas-fired plants, which in the future will run on hydrogen, half a gigawatt of hydrogen-fired plants, and half a gigawatt of long-term storage capacity. So based on what we have already said, we think that these three are the basic challenges that the CCUS deployment is facing. First of all, it is important to expand the CCS deployment beyond to hard-to-abate industries, including the power sector in the applications. It's necessary to make some further adjustments to the legislation and to the regulatory framework to enable the market development. And of course, it is important to de-risk the CCUS projects by well-designed government support, both on an EU and national level. So how should we move forward? We should set some realistic targets beyond 2030. We should prioritize CCS applications in sectors, including power generation, in order to be able to reach the set targets on EU and national level. We should strengthen the legal and regulatory framework to support CCUS market sectors across the value chain on all national and EU levels. We should do some fine-tuning of the permitting procedures, which is a necessary step in order to promote the deployment of projects. We should financially support the entire value chain in order to de-risk the projects and not lose the momentum. We should establish standards for technology and infrastructure development. And of course, we should facilitate the cross-border collaborations across the value chain. So this is all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. And